Hello, everyone. Seeing people slowly joining. Let's wait till a couple of other will be joining. But let me already welcome you to this SIINC for WASH webinar that focuses on the results and lessons from the field. I think I see always new people popping up. But we do have also a poll that I'd kindly ask Arnaud to bring forth whilst we're waiting for everyone else to join. The idea is really to get a little bit more of an idea on who's in the room. Of course, you can also write in the chat, introduce yourself or your company. Please feel free and don't be shy.
Indeed, it's just a few questions to get to know who is in the audience, where you're from, where you're joining us from, what type of organization you belong to, and of course, if you ever heard of social impact incentives before today or not.
And for those who may be more familiar with SIINC, the acronym, it's what it stands for, basically, social impact incentives. But you might have heard of SIINC and not on the longer version, because I'm not sure about the others, but we do love acronyms at Roots of Impact. And again, I think I'm seeing also more and more people joining. So while I already have welcomed some of you, I'm also welcoming the rest, the new joiners, to this webinar. We have a very packed agenda and a lot of exciting insights that we're going to hear very soon. But for those who are just joining and we want to give also a couple of minutes more, I ask you all to fill out the poll to get a little bit of an idea who's in the room. And maybe, Arnaud, I'll ask you to then show either the preliminary results or share them, however it works best for you.
Yeah, of course.
Ones that we have, of course.
Yes.
Some results.
Looking at the locations, it looks like the majority is joining us from Europe with about 2/3. We have about 2 participants joining us from Africa and 1 participant so far joining us from Asia. If we talk about the type of organizations that are joining us today, I would say more than half are actually impact enterprises. We have 1 impact investor or financial institution among us, 1 NGO and 1 other. And in question of SIINC, I'm quite happy to see that almost everybody has heard of it at least. The majority also know what it's about. And 2 don't really remember what it's about, but I guess with our short refresher, we will be able to bring everybody up to speed.
Absolutely.
And maybe one housekeeping rule, as you know, there will be a Q&A with the entrepreneurs at the end. So if you have questions for the entrepreneurs, please write them in the chat, and then we will be able to pick them up at the end.
Perfect. Thank you. And I would suggest let's move ahead because we do have a quite packed agenda. If I may ask to jump to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So as you see, after a very short introduction by Aqua for All and Roots of Impact, we'll give you a quick insight into our SIINC journey so far, as well as the instrument itself. I'm glad to hear that most of you know it. But for those that may not be super familiar with it, we'll present it very quickly. But then we will very quickly also move to the actual highlight of this webinar and give the floor to our entrepreneurs to allow them to introduce themselves prior to also having a Q&A, a question and answer session with them. We will, as Arnaud has already mentioned, of course, also have a Q&A session with the audience, so allow for any questions you may have to be addressed. But as Arnaud has said, please don't hesitate to also put them as we go along. We will collect them and discuss them together at the end. Yeah, here are some faces. One is myself, of course, but you also have seen, have heard at least Arnaud, who's the transaction manager for impacting finance from Aqua for All, and Gurle, who's an associate at Roots of Impact and who will be moderating the Q&A session at the end. But as I said, our focus and very special guests are William, Pratap, and Nikolai, who respectively represent KWSH, aQysta, and ATEC. And yeah, I do want to also take the chance to officially thank them for their time and for joining us and sharing their experience to date. It is quite late afternoon, given that they're all Asia-based, so even more so, thank you very much. And yeah, without further ado, I'd pass the mic to Arnaud.
Thank you, Leonessa. I think, yeah, before we go further, it's worth mentioning the partnership that we have Aqua for All together with Roots of Impact, and also introduce the work that we do as organizations. First of all, Aqua for All is an international foundation. We are a catalytic capital provider for drinking water and sanitation solutions in emerging markets, so Asia and Africa. We have more than 2 decades of experience in supporting the market-based approaches in the sector. We work directly with social entrepreneurs by providing them financing, as well as technical assistance. We support enterprises in all stages. We deploy capital into third-party blended finance structures. Our goal is to really bring in growth capital into the wash sector, and specifically to social enterprises in the wash sector. And we are very proud actually to have co-designed and designed actually several solutions in that sector. And of course, we are the funder of the Impact Linked Fund for Wash.
Great. And very quickly also to Roots of Impact. In this particular framework, in the SIINC for Wash program, as in many others, of course, we are the transaction managers. In fact, in general, Roots of Impact, at Roots of Impact, we manage catalytic capital that is of other parties, in this case, Aqua for All, and focus on impact-linked finance. What does it mean? It means that we basically design and implement innovative impact-linked finance solutions, a variety of them, all, however, aimed at supporting enterprises around the globe and in various sectors. And what we do is not only to design these instruments, but also to create, let's say, a thriving environment for impact-linked finance to thrive. And we do that via capacity and community building, as well as knowledge exchange. We do also have an advisory firm that basically aims at supporting catalytic funders in shifting towards these more innovative financing practices. But as I said, the focus really is on the first part. In the past 3 years or so, a little bit more, we have been supporting and closely collaborating with Aqua for All, including on this SIINC for Wash program. But I will pass the mic back to Arnaud, who will give you a little bit more context around it.
Thank you, Leonessa. Indeed, what has been our journey, and especially why did we start with this journey? I think the starting point was the realization that there's a lot of social entrepreneurs in the wash sector, but maybe also in other sectors, that were really struggling in finding financing. And that they usually had either 2 options, either apply for grants or go to the other side of the spectrum, asking for impact investment. And I can hear somebody, maybe if you can make sure everybody is muted. So there was not much in between for these social entrepreneurs. So there was a big gap, and we also saw that as a huge potential actually to support those enterprises, especially enterprises that are on their way to scale commercially, but want to make sure that they can keep their impact focus. So with this approach and this idea, we started with Roots of Impact and launched the SIINC for WASH with Roots of Impact, because they're, of course, the expert on social impact incentives, and founded 3 enterprises, ATEC, aQysta, and KWSH, the 3 enterprises that we have today that are part of that journey. We have to say that actually it was really a great success, before also showing you the results. But in general, it was a great success. We saw also a lot of interest, both from enterprises, but as well as from funders. And as a result, we decided to launch the Impact Linked Fund for WASH last year. We implemented, as part of the Impact Linked Fund as well, TA support, because we realized a lot of enterprises need as well additional support, especially on investment readiness and impact management and monitoring, which is extremely important on that trajectory. And so we could support 14 enterprises so far. We have signed 2 more SIINC transactions, one with Jibu and Aqua Clara Kenya this year. And we also have launched this summer impact-linked loans as a new instrument. And we actually plan to launch new instruments as well in the future.
Great. As you have seen, it's been actually a quite exciting impact journey so far. You may though still ask yourself, what is actually impact-linked finance? So very quickly to that, I of course could speak about it for hours, but rest assured, I will try to keep it very short, as I know that most of you actually have heard of it and are here actually to hear from our superstars, the entrepreneurs. But just to give you some background info that I hope that is helpful, impact-linked finance is basically a means to enable enterprises, in this particular case, of course, WASH enterprises, to gain access to innovative finance. This shall help them scale in both business as well as impact terms, so that basically no one does come at the cost of the other. In this particular webinar, we focus on the SIINC for WASH program, and as such, we focus on one particular specific impact-linked finance instrument, that is SIINC, or as some of you may know it, social impact incentives, which is also the flagship instrument of impact-linked finance. What is, and if I may ask to jump to the next slide, SIINC, I don't want to go into too much technical details again of this grant-like, and actually let me stress that it is only like instrument, because it is definitely not the typical grant you may be familiar with. But I do want to highlight 2 features that actually are of great importance and that you can also see in this graph here. Firstly, SIINC is a results-based finance instrument. That means that the financial rewards are only provided upon the enterprise creating specific pre-agreed impact, and upon the impact actually being externally verified. So in that sense, you see the gray figure verifier on the bottom left, the outcome player, in our case, of course, Aqua for All, who provides the financial rewards to the impact enterprise in the middle. What is important to know is that the concept of better terms for better impact, which is also basically the motto of impact-linked finance, does also apply here. That means that basically the more impact the enterprise creates, the more financial rewards do they receive. The second feature that I want to highlight, and the only icon that I haven't touched upon, is the investor icon on the right. Basically, as part of, while it's not directly part of the SIINC agreement, it is the part of the SIINC because we do require the enterprises to raise repayable investment in parallel to the SIINC. In fact, ideally, SIINC does even help the enterprise in leveraging private capital to further improve their ability to scale. This is done, among others, by providing the enterprises basically with additional revenue streams. But I think that's really it on the theoretical details. Of course, happy to take any questions, but if there are none at the moment, I would suggest to really directly move into the more exciting part of the webinar and to hear from the enterprises themselves on how SIINC has supported them. And so I would pass, if I'm not mistaken, the mic to William from KWSH.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks very much for the introduction. I'm William Puyo. I've been the general manager of KWSH now for over 5 years. I'm happy to give a brief overview about what exactly we do in Cambodia and how we've benefited from the SIINC funding. So just as a bit of a background, in Cambodia, there are hundreds of private water operators who are responsible for developing and operating small potable piped water utilities to supply to households, businesses, and other water users in rural and semi-rural areas. However, few of these operators actually have the kind of technical, operational, and financial expertise that you need to run those businesses effectively. And due to their small size, they also really struggle to achieve economies of scale or to access to capital. So as a result, you have over 10 million people, representing over 80% of the rural population, which remain excluded from the piped water market because most are not actually covered by any infrastructure. And those who are covered often face really poor service quality. So the capacity to professionalize and scale up their operations will be really critical to actually improving access rates. However, the market's current informality and supply-side fragmentation makes it really difficult to mobilize the substantial resources needed to make a significant difference. So it's in that context that KWSH was established 10 years ago now, with the goal to consolidate and professionalize the sector. Specifically, what we do is acquire existing but underperforming utilities and then invest to increase the water treatment capacity and expand distribution pipelines to reach new communities. And we have in place at our head office a management team with key expertise so that the group can systematically define and cost-effectively implement across our stations the best practices which are critical to ensuring high service quality. So as of today, our portfolio includes 5 stations, which cover over 40,000 households in their combined license areas, of which half are already connected to the systems. And the number of connections is actually still growing very rapidly today because we're in the middle of a 600-kilometer pipeline expansion project. And beyond that, our plan is to continue acquiring new stations to replicate our model in other areas. So regarding the SIINC that we structured with Roots of Impact and Aqua for All, it was designed specifically to help ease some of the tension between our commercial and social objectives through 2 specific metrics. The first is relating to one challenge that we face consistently, which is that while we always target commercially viable areas to develop piped infrastructure, in each area there will always be some remaining percentage of households who would otherwise remain excluded, either because they can't afford to connect to the system or because they are in lower density areas, which would be too expensive on a per household basis for us to expand the pipeline to. So metric 1, therefore, focuses on our 2 most mature stations called Phuc and Chalong, with the aim to incentivize us to deepen our impact there. See, both stations had completed their original expansion plans years ago, but still have remaining unconnected as well as uncovered households. So given the maturity of those 2 stations, these households are the most difficult to reach in terms of marketing and pipeline expansion. So new connections were going to continue stagnating there without further external support. So the metric 1 payments are therefore tied to us achieving connection rates beyond that expected stagnation level, which allowed us to not only then be more aggressive with our recurring discount promotions on connection fees, but it also gave us the much needed impetus to approve an additional 58 kilometers of pipeline expansions there to cover more than 1,500 new households, which we otherwise would have likely continued to neglect in the absence of those incentives. So those additional investments are actually very necessary for us to target the full grant amount by the end of the contract. As for the second metric, instead of focusing on existing stations in our portfolio, that one looks further ahead to the new stations that we plan to acquire. Specifically, this metric aims to reward KWSH for acquiring new stations which have higher levels of additionality compared to the average areas that we otherwise look at in terms of three key characteristics. One being higher rates of poor households in those areas. Two is lower rates of current pipeline coverage. And finally, lower rates of access to clean water in general, including from alternative sources. So the idea is that it can help us to take a little bit more risk with areas where the impact would otherwise be greater than what we would normally target. So that's it. That's everything from my side. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, William. And just also on terms of on ticket size and financial leverage, KWSH is receiving up to 350K SIINC, and it came with a 1 to 10 financial leverage. I'm super looking forward to hearing more about KWSH's experience to date. But prior to doing so, I would pass on the mic to, I believe, Nikolai. Yes. No, Pratap, beg your pardon.
Yeah. Thank you, Leonessa. Hello, everyone. So my name is Pratap Thapa. I'm one of the co-founders of aQysta. aQysta is a company that works with smallholder farmers in Malawi, Nepal, and India. We are founded in the Netherlands, and we work with smallholder farmers to provide a holistic service that includes access to water, so access to irrigation, but also training and farming inputs. And ultimately, we connect the harvest of the farmers to the market. And all the technology and service that we provide to farmers, we do not charge an upfront payment, but we take a percentage from the sales of the harvest, so that we are basically saying if our services and products create you a value, we want to share that value. And if it doesn't, then we are also in it with you as a farmer. We as a company, we started by developing irrigation technology that you see here in the picture, which is basically a hydro-powered water pump. It uses the flow of the river to pump part of the water to farms without using any fuel or electricity. And we started as a technology company that would sell these pumps, and we switched to a service company where this technology is provided as a service instead of sales of hardware. And this is where SIINC comes in, as we see that the water is the most critical element in farming, especially for poor farmers who are not yet farming commercially. And this is the first step towards commercial farming to increase their income. But it is difficult for farmers to afford the technology. And it is also difficult for us as a small company to provide access to this technology all by financing ourselves. So it is in a way easier to provide other farming inputs, but the capital expenditure of providing irrigation as a service is higher. And this challenge is solved for us by SIINC, that it enables us to roll out to more farmers where we can combine the irrigation access in together with other services that we provide. And for us, the first metric is how percentage growth in farmers with access to irrigation as service. So year on year, how many more farmers can we onboard where we can provide access to irrigation, where previously they did not have access to irrigation, and in most of the cases did not farm at all in the dry season, and they would only do one rainy season farming. So how many farmers can we onboard? And the second metric is on increase of smallholder farmers' income. This is, of course, the most important impact goal for us as a company, that ultimately whatever we do, we want it to reflect in the increase in income of the farmers. And but it is also the most difficult to achieve and also to measure, and that is where with SIINC it gives us this leverage to really focus on this impact and go for this impact, which we wouldn't be able to do as much with commercial investment only. And this is what we have been doing with SIINC. For us, the SIINC ticket size is up to 250K with a leverage of 1:4.
Thank you so much, Pratap. And again, I think you may have already give also a sneak peek on what comes next, but thank you so much. Excited to hear more about it. And now, last but not least, or least but not last, I always get that wrong, Nikolai from ATEC.
Excellent, thanks Vanessa. Last but not least, we'll talk about ATEC, second enterprise calling in from Cambodia tonight, or this morning for some of you. ATEC, so I'm Nikolai, I'm the country director of ATEC, based in Cambodia. ATEC is a social enterprise registered as a business, so we're a taxpayer in the countries where we are. Founded by NGOs like Engineers Without Borders Australia, Live and Learn, different NGOs in about 2016 here in Cambodia, where I am. We're in the meantime also present in Bangladesh, where we have a full country organization. And we've got our headquarters in Australia, where we started, and exploring in many other countries in Asia and mainly in Africa. ATEC exists to solve clean cooking. So different than the two other enterprises we've seen, you wouldn't notice any wash. There's no blue color in our logo. So we're coming from a little bit of a different angle. So clean cooking, basically everybody who is cooking with charcoal and wood, inhaling the smoke while cooking, and that usually happens at the base of the pyramid. And transition these people to clean cooking. We have now two solutions. One of them are biodigesters, the other ones are magnetic induction stoves. This SIINC opportunity is really focusing on our biodigesters. You can't see it on the picture, but I've got a little model here. In reality, it's about 2 meters high. This is a biodigester. It transforms cow manure, pig manure. You feed this in like a cow's stomach, turns this into biogas and fertilizer. The biogas is the outcome that you can see here in the picture. It's one of our customers cooking with biogas, cooking cleanly, and cooking for free, because the cows and pigs, the manure they use produces biogas. And as a side product, also have some fertilizer that can be used, is very enjoyed by the farmers. I've mentioned cow manure and pig manure, but also what you can do, you can connect a toilet to a biodigester and feed in the human feces into the biodigester, and use that also to generate biogas and fertilizer. This hasn't been that much in our center initially, before we joined this program, but as you'll see in a second, it actually was, it helped, this program helped us to put our focus back on a really interesting area. That's metric number 3. I'll talk about it in a second. Wanted to talk about the challenge briefly. I mentioned we're a business, a social enterprise for the business with an impact objective. And as you can read here, when you scale up, you risk sometimes to lose a little bit focus and drift in your mission, or focus more on business or more on social. So this is where SIINC really helped us to refocus and zone in on our impact. We're a company that interacts with farmers on Facebook. So we have a marketing team. We operate just like any market participant, and try to grow. And in that context, I think it's always very good to have something that refocuses you back on your impact. We started with, or we've gone through this project with 3 metrics, one more than the 2 others, I think. The first one about this general idea I explained at the beginning, making sure that the right households at the base of the pyramid switch from wood, fuels, charcoal to biogas. So that was incentivized, not only the growth of the company, but also picking the right customers, those who are currently using those fuels. The second metric was focusing on customer satisfaction with the Net Promoter Score, NPS. Some of you might know that from marketing. It's this question, would you recommend our product to your friends or family? And if you're really yes, then that's good for you. If you're only so-so, that's not so good for you, meaning less happy customers. Really interesting cultural findings on that, also on how to interpret this question in Cambodia. We had to tweak this around a little bit. And the last one on installing toilets together with a biodigester. The standard package is a biodigester with that stove you can see here, sold as a pay-go solution. So you pay off in small increments. And we hadn't really sold many toilet-connected biodigesters in the past. I can probably share a little bit later about where that came from. This project helped us to focus on that additional element that can be added to a biodigester, and we managed to sell quite a few toilet-connected biodigesters in the course of this project. It's been a really interesting learning experience for us as a team, and great for our customers who are now also connecting their toilets to their biodigesters.
Great, thank you so much, Nikolai. And yes, I think on some of the points that you mentioned, we'll come back to in the next questions. Just very quickly also on the ticket size being up to 150K and the financial leverage 1 to 5. I think everyone is quite excited about it, or at least I am very much, and I even know what is coming up. Maybe that's why. But before that, I would pass on the mic to Arnaud to tell us a little bit, to give us a little bit of an overview on what has the achievements to date.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lenessa. Indeed, this is the slide everybody was awaiting. I think what's important is to first also explain the setup. So the starting point is, of course, always the baseline of the metrics that all the enterprises have. So that's what you see on the left. These are, of course, the metrics that we have agreed we would incentivize. And then after each year, or more often, we would have an impact verifier who would then confirm the impact that has been generated. So you can see that for 2022 and 2023. And then depending on the exact improvement or percentage of increase of impact reached, then we would then, or the enterprise would then receive the agreed compensation. So overall, if you look at the whole slide, we see that the overall performance is actually positive on all metrics, which is great. If we start with KWSH, KWSH could over the years increase the percentage of households connected to their piped water system in both villages. If you look at aQysta, they could, in the first year, really increase significantly the share of farmers that have been convinced to join this program of buying a pump that is then paid back after harvest. In the second year, they could also really increase significantly the number of farmers that have then access to irrigation, as well as increase as well significantly the income, the average income of those farmers. And if you look at ATEC, starting with relatively a low net promoter score or relatively low customer satisfaction, who could really increase it significantly over the years, as well as convincing more customers to connect their toilets to their biodigesters. So overall, with all three enterprises, we are very glad to showcase today very positive results, and actually able to show that with the right support, impact can be really pushed and be achieved. And I think then we can actually really continue on the questions on how and how you created it, or under which conditions, because I believe each enterprise has been through a different type of journey. And I think we are starting as well with Pratap. One question to you. Because as I just mentioned, in the first year you had one set of metrics. In the second year you have had different sets of metrics. Can you maybe explain slightly what's the reason, and then what was the implication then on the SIINC support?
Yeah, sure. So for us, while we joined the SIINC program, we also went through a bit of change in strategy of the business and a bit of transformation or a shift in the business. So when we started, we were only looking at, okay, instead of selling pumps with upfront payment, we sell the pumps with pay after harvest, whereas we then took it further and became a more holistic service provider, including inputs and market linkers, and our focus for revenue generation was towards like sales of harvest. So this shift meant that the some of the metrics, so the metric one had to be redesigned, and that was painful also for I think SIINC, because it was an unknown territory, and but in the end it worked out pretty well, and it was very supportive of the SIINC team, and for us it worked out very well in the sense that the SIINC project and the metrics align so much well with the business objective, and so we do not have to speak different language for the project versus our own impact goal or growth goals, and that makes it easier to streamline the operations, the team, and also we can share the same data also with other investors and potential investors. So it sort of streamlines the whole business, and you do not have to live in sort of two realities. And for us, like when we first heard about, for example, the SIINC project, it's always for me like, wow, that's really ideal. And if we can really show the increase in income of farmers, and then if we get incentivized for reaching that impact, that is really great. And that should be the ultimate aim of our existence as a company, and we were really excited. But when implementing it, it was also challenging to get like the team and the data and the business strategy all aligned to get to the goal. So there were some challenges, but I think at least from our side, we are happy with that we adopted it, and we now can have everything aligned.
Thank you, Pratap.
And I think we'll also talk a little bit more on the challenges, so more to come on that. But allow me to get to Nikolai. As you already mentioned, Nikolai, when we started structuring the SIINC, the focus really was on biodigesters. And I mean, particularly the sanitation component was a very, very, very small proportion of your sales, let's say. And we then jointly agreed to try to increase that, despite it not being your main focus. So question to you, what was your overall experience with this sanitation-related incentive?
Yeah, for us, I think the answer to this question has an internal and an external customer sort of facing component. Pratap used the term unknown territory. So this was a little bit unknown territory to us. We knew that you can connect the toilet to a biodigester. We had done it here and there, but it wasn't that much in our radar. Relatively early on, of the project, we had Shabana from aQuysta for All visiting us in the office. I don't know if she's on the call. There's a bigger group from aQuysta for All, I think, also on the call with Anna. So Shabana was going through our office and asking people, do you like toilets? And people were looking at her, not really understanding the question, but saying, yes, I do. And that was a good illustration for the toilets were not in our center as human beings, yes, but not as ATEC team members or as running our business. So focusing on this specific metric really helped us to start thinking more about it and understand it better. And specifically because we had some TA support for this project, unknown territory, we didn't really know how to market it. It's a pretty difficult topic to, when you don't have to do it, when it's not the core product, to actually market toilets and talk about toilets. Some people I've talked to from the World Toilet Board also call it the yak factor, you know, like you don't want to talk about it, but you want to sell it, so you need to talk about it. How to talk about it, how to market it in a way that it attracts people. That was an area we had no experience and where we needed to discuss internally to come over some barriers, and then translate it into something external, how to communicate it with customers. That's been a really interesting journey, and this is result-based, and the result is we've had quite a few toilets installed in the last 20 months, and that's exactly what we were supposed to achieve. That's fantastic.
Great, thank you so much.
And if you don't have a follow-up question, Leonessa, then I guess the next question is for William. So when we just showed the results, there was nothing on metric 2, which was about the new locations and the additionality on those new locations. Can you maybe tell us why and what implications it has? And you're on mute. Yes.
Yeah, so you're quite right. I mean, we've had a lot of success so far with metric 1, and we're on track for getting very close, if not reaching the maximum target. Whereas for metric 2, we've fallen behind. And the reason for that is entirely related to the time needed for related fundraising. You see, pipe water is a rather difficult sector in general due to often restricted margins inherent to the business, which require very heavy upfront investment in infrastructure with long-term payback periods. And what's more, we're operating in Cambodia, so it's a frontier market with its own inherent difficulties. Most specialized investors in utilities have quite high minimum ticket sizes with long and complex due diligence processes, and they assign a relatively high country risk to Cambodia, which further complicates things. So as a result, it took us over 2 years to just close our fundraising relating to the 600-kilometer pipeline expansion plan, which I mentioned in the introduction, which is to cover all of the remaining viable households in our existing portfolio. It also took them the same amount of time to separately finalize commercial negotiations for a new $7 million debt facility, which we will use then to acquire and build out the new stations, which are needed to meet the metric 2 targets. And we are now just working through the final conditions precedent before we can sign that agreement, which is expected end of this year or very, very early 2024. That being said, though, in the meantime, we have been continuing to study new stations, and I am pleased to confirm that we have completed all the negotiations for our first new acquisition since signing the SIINC agreement. And our existing shareholders are going to be stepping in to plug the funding gap so that this all happens in time. It is actually quite a large license area with over 8,000 households in it, and due to the currently very low pipe coverage rate and low access to improved water sources in general, including alternatives, it's categorized as medium additionality. So that combined with the size means that as a result, this acquisition alone will account for 1/3 of the metric 2 commitment. And we also have other strong leads that we're currently conducting due diligence on, quite a few we're at an advanced stage with as well. So we expect to close at least 1 or 2 more such acquisitions so we can achieve most of the target before the end of the contract in end of May. And relating to that, a great strength of the SIINC structuring is that it's not time sensitive, so it allows us to be rewarded for the impact being created at any time throughout the lifetime of the SIINC. So the delays have no material impact on what we're receiving so long as we complete the requirements within the contract period.
Thanks, William. And I think when we structured it back then, it was also to allow for this extra flexibility, given that that dependency in quotation mark from external investment to really also do that. But I'm glad that it worked out and it served the purpose. Great. There is one further question that we want to pose to all of you. I had already mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar that SIINC is a grant-like instrument, but in fact, SIINC is not like any grant. There are many reasons that I shall not all mention, but there are a couple. For instance, the fact that, you know, it is very entrepreneur centric, so it's really like done in a very collaborative manner. So really with the entrepreneurs, it is all about additionality. Some of you know that it is my favorite word, and I shall possibly also repeat more and more in this webinar as well. But that means that, you know, we don't reward anything that is business or impact as usual, but only anything that is on top of that. And there are many other aspects that imply that a grant is, that SIINC is not like any grant. This is all great. I mean, very unbiased, Lunessa, of course, thinks that it is great, but it is also at times can come with a certain costs or certain challenges. So the question I'd like to ask you is whether you have experienced any challenges, whether during the structuring or during the implementation of the SIINC. And I think I may want to ask Nikolai to start, because I think you haven't kickstarted a section yet. So over to you, please.
I'll kickstart this one on challenges. And yeah, it's not a grant. It's not, you write a proposal, then you lean back, you do your work that you would do anyway, additionality, and then you get some money. Yeah, it's very different. It's very results oriented, of course, and you commit to something. You set a baseline. Sometimes setting the baseline is actually also quite helpful for yourself, because you're not so aware of it, and you go through this process. You might have noticed or not on Anil's chart that we actually had 3 KPIs, and the first one of our KPIs we haven't achieved yet, and that's the one pretty much in the core of our business of converting people from really dirty cooking to clean cooking. And we've struggled a little bit with this one, and that's not due to the project. That's there are various reasons behind, but struggled a little bit getting these at the base of the pyramid people that are using the most polluting ways of cooking and transitioning to our solution, the biogas. So we've had a higher proportion of people transitioning from LPG gas to biogas. That as such is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's more cost effective for the families. They're producing their own fertilizer, and it's better for the environment to turn their manure or their connected toilet into biogas. But the higher hanging fruit, the tougher one would be to turn the charcoal and wood users into biogas users. We worked hard on it, but we haven't achieved this target as much as we would have wanted to. It was very helpful to have this project to focus back on this. So that's, you know, our objective is to reach the base of the pyramid. So we've tried hard to refocus back on this. We haven't achieved it yet. It's on our radar, and we're working hard with it. We might not get to the hoped or aspired level in the context of this project, but it woke us up a little bit and helped us to start some initiatives to reach and to focus more on the right target group. One thing I have to say is also that the whole project and the process that you're discussing with the SIINC team on where you are, why you are where you are, and why you are not where you want to be, that's been very helpful, and the team has been very flexible in developing solutions to come around and better understand our settings. So that's been a really great experience for us.
I love, Nikolai, that you changed the challenges into something positive. But thank you so much. And you're right? There are certain things that are beyond everyone's means, as in like who can expect, governmental subsidies, etc., that makes it even harder on you. And while we, of course, try to adapt also certain aspects, there are certain things that simply are beyond the means. But of course, because SIINC is a results-based finance mechanism and it is based on those results, that simply implies that that either incentives are not provided or lower incentives are provided. Thank you so much, though, Nikolai. William, may I ask you to take the floor?
Sure. I mean,
on
so
the
I've touched
challenges you've
upon,
experienced?
yeah, I've touched on the challenge that we're facing then during the implementation, but then other than that, I mean, the biggest challenge that we faced was going through the original structuring process. From what I recall, the total time spent from the initial online basic application through to the final agreement being signed was around 8 or 9 months. And it did involve a lot of back and forth, a lot of sharing of information and brainstorming around the most appropriate structures to apply. But that being said, the process was actually overall a great experience because there was a very clear willingness from our counterparty to take the time needed to develop a good enough understanding of KWSH and our business to build appropriate incentive structures which fit what we need and which would lead to the improved impact that we were seeking. I mean, in contrast, we've had some unfortunate experiences before where we felt that KWSH would be an excellent fit for other grant providers to help us reach those last mile distribution areas. But often we found ourselves being not eligible due to very specific criteria defined by those grant providers, which can be quite inflexible, regardless of the actual merits of the project and the impact it generates. So from that perspective, SIINC really is a welcome addition to the funding landscape and fills in a gap that the other more rigid funders are not able to adequately handle. And that necessary flexibility is quite wonderfully built into the structure. So as we discussed for metric 1, we agreed on what the overall targets are that we're trying to achieve in terms of household connection rates to unlock the incentive payments. But in practice, it's left to us to approach how we want to reach those targets. So this meant, we could do a combination of reducing the connection fees and expanding pipeline to new areas in a way that worked best for us. So as a result, we had pretty quick and immediate buy-in from our investors because there was a clear benefit for all parties involved. So for the grant, for the SIINC providers, it made sure that we stick to our mission statement and impact objective. For our investors, it allowed us to improve our commercial performance by helping us to install connections to those last mile distribution households and then serve these households in perpetuity, which then grows our recurring revenue streams. And as for our end users, especially the bottom of pyramid households, the SIINC enabled them to access services they otherwise would have continued to be excluded from. So from that perspective, the process was challenging, but overall it was very well balanced in terms of with respect to the benefits then that we end up with the final contract. And so from that perspective, it didn't require an excessive amount of time commitment.
Yeah, and that's also what I meant with entrepreneur-centric and the fact that we really try to make it bottom up, but of course, and tailor-made, but of course that often comes with a lengthier process. Thanks so much, William. Also mindful of the time, I'm jumping directly to Pratap to share also their potential challenges within the SIINC journey.
Yeah, for us, maybe this difference of SIINC is not like any grant. The difference is that the metrics and the targets were set at a company level rather than specific projects. So if there would be another project, we would set like certain milestones only for the project and not look at the company projection or the company direction as such. But in this case, the projections were taking from our business plan, which like any startup had a hockey stick projections, and that in itself is challenging, but especially because we went through a transition of changing our business plan that made it more challenging than to adapt the SIINC target. And that's where other ongoing projects didn't need to be impacted so much because it was very specific project related. Whereas in this case, the company level projections and when the company level plans changed a bit, it also affected the project. That is one challenge. The other more specific to the data and metric measurement. So in general, as I said, it is our goal to increase the income of farmer, and that I think is amazing metric to be able to track that and to be able to also share the data with other potential investors, especially around commercial investors, where you can also show the impact. But in terms of measuring this data and quality of data, we also found it challenging because we try to measure the percentage increase. That means we need a baseline income data from agriculture and then also afterwards. And after we get involved with farmers, that is relatively easier because we have those data more readily available and more quality data, but we have to compare it with the baseline income. And the tool we use is a survey, and asking farmer on a survey questions does not always give you a reliable answer. And so this data measurement and data quality, we also face some challenges, but those are more on a practical and implementation level in terms of the structuring, I think, because we changed our plans as a company. That was probably the bigger challenge.
Thank you, Pratap. And yes, of course, we're all about data, and I think financial projections are difficult, let alone impact projections, of course, and particularly also given the additionality component of impacting finance, also finding, what is impact that you're planning to do anyways often is also quite difficult. But I'm very happy also that we jointly overcame those challenges that we all, and that I mean also with all of the 3 enterprises, jointly grew and drew a lot of lessons and adapted. It has, on my end, been really a fantastic journey so far, and I'm looking forward to also to what comes next, because all of you still have a couple of measurement periods, or 1 or 2 measurement periods ahead of you. I'm also very mindful of the time, though, and I did promise that we had a Q&A session, and now we're 2 minutes basically to the end of the session. I'm quite sorry about that, but I wonder whether anyone has any questions, any burning questions that they want to ask the entrepreneurs. I invite particularly to address them. You can of course address any point. We'll be sharing the presentation and also an email address where you can contact us at any point. But let me stop here and try to use those last couple of minutes to give the floor to the audience.
Thank you, Leonessa. So in the chat, we don't have any questions directed to the entrepreneurs at the moment. So yeah, just to echo, if you do have questions, please raise your hand so we can have some interaction. But while maybe someone is thinking of a great question to ask, and this would be directed to you, Arno, Washking Ghana is asking if impact-linked finance will be rolling out to different parts of the world, including Ghana specifically.
Yeah, thank you, Guchle. So indeed, I saw the question as well. And so for the impact-linked fund, we have actually no strong geographical restrictions. We're focusing, of course, on Africa and Asia, but then, of course, Ghana will be part of it. I think there's a chance that Washkin Ghana has also applied of one of our call for applications for an impact-linked loan. There we had some geographical restrictions, unfortunately, where we were really focusing only on Eastern and Southern Africa. But if we talk about social impact incentives, we have actually no restrictions. So I think this is very much relevant for all the other entrepreneurs who are also joining here today, that for social impact incentives, we do not have any restrictions.
Thank you, Arno. We are at time and we don't have any questions, Leonessa.
Can we run very quickly a last poll just before people leave? But again, I really want to thank everyone for their participation, and do reach out to us, of course. And yeah, I mean, feel free to also reach out to the entrepreneurs. I'm sure they can be approached either via LinkedIn or via the company website. So don't hesitate to do so. And in case, happy also to do the connections.
And while people are filling out the poll, maybe we can go to the last slide so you just see as well our contact address, where you can reach us, which is at ilf@aquaforall.org if you have any ILF WASH inquiries.
And also, of course, feel free to follow on LinkedIn, Aqua for all Roots of Impact for the matter, to also see new upcoming opportunities. We always make sure to post any new call for application we have on our social media, so as to reach as many as we can, really.
Yeah, and feel free as well to follow KWSH, ATEC, and aQysta if you want to continue to see how the journey progresses.
Absolutely. Thank you, Arnaud. That's a very good point. Thanks again to everyone. Have a lovely rest of the day, evening, wherever you're based. And yeah, wishing you all the best.
Thank you
Bye,
very much for your
everyone.
participation. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.